A question came in from the crossing over community that I thought, this is such a good question and it's so important to talk about that I figured I would cover it in this episode. So let's change things up a little bit. The question that came in is this: if someone is stuck in the in-between, if there's a spirit stuck in the in-between, where are their guides? And I think it's a great question. I had that question very early on in my development spiritually. And I asked my guide that. I was like, well, why would anybody be stuck if there's spirit guides? Can't the spirit guides just help them cross on over? He was like, no, and let me tell you why. And then he proceeded to explain it. And I'd like to explain it to you as well. I'm going to give you an analogy because this analogy is one of my favorites and it works so well to explain guide communication, guide energy, how the guides can and cannot help you. And also this analogy has really worked wonders with a lot of the practitioners that I've trained to do crossing over work in understanding how they can get help from the spirit that's stuck, their guide, to help them cross over, how to do it. And I want to leave you with that today in this video. So here is the analogy. The analogy is this: if you are here on earth in a human body, you are like a kid on a playground. There is a large fence around the playground, and outside that fence is your guide. Your guide can yell, can try to get your attention, can call out to other people on the playground. Your guide can call out to other guides that are around the outside of the fence because guides aren't allowed in the playground. The playground is this physical realm we call Earth. So they can call out to other guides that are around the outside of the fence to say, hey, I need this. Can your person maybe help with this? And your person and my person will have them, go over together at the same time and play on the swing set, AKA have your person run into my person at Starbucks on a random Thursday and then, problem solved, everything that they need, they get. Guides are not able, if they were able to manipulate this agreed upon reality, they'd come down here in a human body. And that's just not the case. And the second you come down into a human body, you can't see what's coming up in the future. You can't see, you know what happened in the past, but you don't have the entire lifetime picture of the spiritual path. That's why guides are so effective, because they know the whole story and they get to guide you on your path to make sure that you complete that story in the way that you wanted to complete it. Now, the guides are on the outside of the fence. One of the kids at school is on the playground. There are going to be times that you get hurt. There are going to be times that you laugh. There's going to be times that you have fun. There's going to be times that you're bored. You might take a nap. Sometimes you're over at the swings. Sometimes you're over at the slides. But that's really the analogy that has helped me to conceptualize what guides can and cannot do. They can't come over and physically lift you up the slide so you can slide down, but they can tell you, hey, you want that sensation of sliding, so go over to that thing. Okay, take a step, take another step, and they can encourage. When it comes to crossing over, what happens is the act of crossing over in this analogy would be someone deciding to leave the playground, okay, or not deciding to leave the playground, but they pass away, okay, and they're going to leave their body behind. Their body will stay in the playground, and they'll go through the fence, which is kind of like going through their transition to the other side where the guides are. Now, when someone gets stuck, they let go of the body, but they walk up to that fence, and instead of going through the fence to the other side, they stop short of it. And they'll turn their attention back around to the playground. When they do that, the analogy is kind of saying that their back is turned to their guides. So where a spirit's focus is determines whether or not they continue the natural transition of crossing over or whether they hold still. A spirit's attention needs to be focused on their human linear time life in order to hold still. The transition in death is so automatic. It's so automatic. And people hear about crossing over stories and people getting stuck and they worry. They say, am I going to get stuck? And I tell them chances are good you will not at all, because the transition is just magnetic. You've heard people who have had near-death experiences and they say it's just this beautiful pull of love that's pulling you to the other side. And that's true. When someone gets stuck, there's a lot of different reasons to get stuck, too many to go over in one video here today. But when someone gets stuck, they stop that transition, they push against that transition. And without a physical body, the only way you can push in any direction is through your intent. So as you're transitioning, crossing over, if your intent is to move toward that unconditional love, that beautiful light, that process of transitioning, then you just relax into it and it happens. But when you take your attention somewhere else, if you turn back around to say, I'm not leaving without seeing my kids graduate, or I'm too scared to see what's coming up, I'm going to turn my back on it. You know, whatever it is, when the intent of the person goes from crossing over to turning around, kind of turning their back to that fence, looking back on the human playground that they just left and focusing their attention on that, then their back is turned to their guides. They can't hear them, see them, sense them. They are completely focused on the human existence. In all my years of doing crossing over work, I have never run into someone who was focused on the transition process and stuck. I've never run into someone who is focused on getting to the other side and is stuck. Every single individual I've ever come across has had some psychological reason for being stuck, some psychological reason of fear or of confusion or stubbornness, some psychological flow that is very much linked in to linear time, that is very much linked in to that playground. So what does this look like? When you come across someone who's stuck, all right, let's stick with the analogy. When you come across someone who is stuck, the person has left their physical body, they've approached the fence, they're still inside the fence, they've approached it, and they've turned their back to the fence. And so instead of going through the fence, they're now turned their back to the fence and they're looking back in to the playground. Behind them now is the fence. Behind the fence, on the other side of the fence, is the guide standing there. They don't leave us, they don't abandon us. But if they can't get our intent and our focus toward the direction they're supposed to go, the guides can't do anything. They can't reach through that fence. They can't, reach just a hand through and grab them and pull them. Also, humans that are trying to help the spirit, someone crossing them over, helping them cross over, doesn't ever really cross someone over. They don't shove them through the fence. The living human that's helping the, stuck spirit cross over through that fence is trying to get the spirit to turn their focus back to their transition, to get them to let go of that anchor that they have focused in on the human existence and start to open up to the higher existence, to the other side. It's as if, another analogy that I use very, very frequently is transitioning is like a people mover at an airport. You get on that belt and it just moves you automatically. And you go, you go through your transition to the other side. So someone who's stuck needs to wedge their feet into the side of that people mover to stop moving. It is an act of resistance, or and the resistance can come from fear. There are other situations that this can happen where someone can get stuck, but for the most part, like I said, it's automatic. So when a person who's transitioning to the other side gets stuck, it's because their attention has been brought to some sort of linear time, fear-based topic. So I'll say this again, the person crossing them over, the living human being that's trying to help the spirit who's stuck cross over, we don't cross them over. We don't push them through. You can't. That's not part of the whole process. But what you can do is shake their attention loose from what they're focused on and get their attention on the transition process, on the guides. Now, if they're scared of the transition process, this is the great time to say, do you see your guides? Do you see, and this could be their mom or their grandmother or a loved one, and you can call out with your heart to the loved ones connected to this person that are on the other side and say, hey, can you help? And it's an energetic pull. And I've never asked for help from loved ones on the other side and not gotten the help. They've always showed up. It's always a variety of different people, but they've always showed up, someone's grandmother or someone's brother or someone's sister or someone's mom or someone's dad. And they, you know what they do? They walk up to that other side of the fence where the guide is, and they stand next to the guide, and they stand there lined up on the other side of that fence. And the job of the person crossing the spirit over is to get the spirit to recognize them. Can you look around? Do you see anyone you know? And I've seen it time after time after time when a spirit who's stuck starts to connect energetically and turn their attention to a guide on the other side or a loved one on the other side, the transition just starts again. It just starts again, and they start crossing over. The beauty of crossing over is the further you get in the transition, the more you don't necessarily want to return back to earth. The further you get in the transition, the more you're completely absorbed in 100% unconditional love. So the goal of somebody doing the crossing over work is to get them just a little further on their path, a little further into their transition, because if you can just get them a little further, they'll start to feel that love, and then they'll start to feel, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. Oh, I'm okay. Okay, I'm okay. That's the goal of crossing someone over. So energetically, guides, loved ones on the other side, on the outside of that fence, can kind of pull energetically and try to get the person's attention that's stuck, and try to call out to them, et cetera, et cetera. And the person, the living human that's doing the crossing over work, can energetically, with love, push the person to turn around, I'm pushing the energy this way so you can see the energy. So with that push and pull, both of which are sources of love, not force, because force, yeah, that's a whole different world. But both of which are sources of love, that push and that pull hopefully will get the spirit, the person who's stuck, to turn around and focus back in on their transition. So if you're doing this work, first off, thank you. It's a wonderful thing. And go ahead, ask for the guides and ask for loved ones of the spirit that you're working with to help you. Know that they can come up to the outside of that fence, and they can, you know, pour out the love and get the attention of the person that they care about so deeply, that's in their soul group, that they want to cross over through that fence. And for you, lovingly, see if you can get the person to focus on their transition again. And many, many times, getting them to focus on their transition is getting them to let go of their focus on the issue that they're focused on in their human linear time path. Another way to say that is getting them to focus back on their transition, is getting them to turn back around toward the fence and keep moving forward. Because if they're stuck, their back is to the fence, they're looking at the playground, and they're focused on it, and they're focused on it, and they're focused on it, and they're focused on it. Your goal is to get them to turn back around, move through that fence, let their guides and loved ones be there to hold them and love them and care about them. It's beautiful work. It is beautiful work. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. I think it's fantastic when people go out there and do it. And so if you're doing it, again, I want to say thank you. If you're new to it, hang in there. Every single situation is different, and do GCP every single time you go out there and do clearing work. But just know that guides, as much as they have a ton of influence to be able to show us signs, send us messages, things like that. Remember, they're on the outside of the fence. We're the ones in the playground. And when someone on the playground needs to go home, well, we need to help them. Why? Because ghosts are people too.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Crossing Over community, a loving and safe community of individuals who are shining light on the beautiful process of the death transition. Members of this community are amazing people just like yourself. Join the discussion, access more in-depth trainings, and be a part of this growing movement by joining the Crossing Over community today.